creatures of the night. What music they make.
Anybody else have Nosferatu fever? Just me. Let's talk about vampires. Hello, Champagne Dreamers. Welcome back to my channel. Or if you're new here, I don't know how you found me, but stick around, hit that subscribe button below. I would love to have you as part of the fam. My name is Janessa, and I am North Dakota's trash queen of glam, geek, and gore. Today, we will talk about the gore. And I promised not to do that impression anymore. I just saw Nosferatu not too long ago, maybe long ago, depending on when I actually edit this, but I went with a friend on New Year's Day. I love the new Nosferatu. Oh, it is so dreamy and ethereal, but also gritty and gory and a little bit sexy. It's so good. I really loved it. And so you know what? I've had a couple people ask me in comments on horror videos, what are some of my favorite vampire movies? So I decided let's go ahead and open up the coffin to see what my favorite vampire movies are. And if you're excited for that, we're getting into it right now.
I'm creepy, creepy, creepy. Oh, I'm creepy, creepy. I'm creepy, creepy, creepy. Oh, so creepy, creepy. I'm creepy, creepy, creepy. Oh, I'm creepy, creepy.
All right, I can never just stop with 10, and so I have a couple things that are not movies that we'll talk about first. Obviously, I've talked on and on and on and on and on and on about how I love Dark Shadows. I love Dark Shadows. I am obsessed with it. Now, vampires in that show, Barnabas Collins, I like him, but he was never my favorite part. I liked a lot of the side characters. I loved me some Julia Hoffman. I loved me some witches and some werewolves. David Selby in the day could get it. Ugh, so hot. I love Dark Shadows, so that's a given. But I also love another TV show, and that is American Horror Story, specifically season 5, Hotel. I liked that season. I know it's a little bit divisive. It's not as divisive as some of the others, but I know some people really hate it. I thought it was really good. I don't think it's the best season. It's not even maybe in my top 3, but I thought it was solid. Lady Gaga, I think that was her first season. She did really great. There were all of those men that people keep trying to convince me are different people, but I think it's just the same. It's like Matt Bomer and Finn Wittrock and all the ones that look exactly the same. They were all in that, and they were all naked, and they were all beautiful. And it was just gorgeous and bloody and sexy. And that's what I love in a vampire movie. So you're not going to see things like 30 Days of Night on this list, because I love my vampires sexy. Vampires should be sexy. It's about blood and life and hearts beating and all of that. So that's what I look for. Or I like a little bit of camp, all of that kind of stuff. So absolutely, season 5 of American Horror Story, Hotel. That's a great vampire experience. Also, creepy paper. What we do in the shadows. I love me some Nandor. Oh, I could eat that on toast. I love him. I think he's gorgeous. I think he's so sexy in that. And it's so funny and quirky. And Nadia, and then her little doll. I love it. And Jackie Daytona is always a favorite. We love that. So good. I love what we do in the shadows. And the last thing is a book. I love Justin Cronin's The Passage. It's a trilogy, and I haven't read the other two because life happens. But Justin Cronin's The Passage was such an interesting take on vampires and how it developed. And it's kind of this dystopian future even before the vampires show up. And so I thought they did a really great job of setting up this sort of dystopian future, getting the very start of this sort of vampire situation, and then the book shoots forward like 100 years into the future, and you see people living in the aftermath of this apocalypse, but the apocalypse is vampires. So I thought it was a really interesting way to do it. I love that book. I need to reread it before I read the other two, but I absolutely want to read that whole trilogy. Maybe that'll be one of my goals for 2025, is to finally finish Justin Cronin's The Passage trilogy. But enough about that. Let's get into my top 10 vampire movies, starting with number 10. Number 10 is Bram Stoker's Dracula from like 1993. Keanu Reeves, yum. And I love that he seems to be, by all accounts, just like a cool dude. So I love that because I was so hot for Keanu Reeves back in the day. Love it. And I love that Bram Stoker's Dracula adaptation is really about Dracula in the age of AIDS. Because Dracula is all about blood and life force. And so when you have this thing that by that point had been ravaging the queer community for over a decade, to then have this interpretation of Dracula that really is kind of a metaphor for AIDS and what's happening in queer communities. It's really interesting. I maybe will do a whole video on that, but I love it. The weird, like, gothic pope-looking Dracula is very strange to me. It's not my favorite because it's not as sexy. But I love that movie. There was a Sega Genesis video game that I liked. But I like that movie, and because of the sort of allegory, it was enough to make it into the number 10 spot. In the number 9 spot is the new movie adaptation of Stephen King's Salem's Lot. There's also a short story, Jerusalem's Lot, and I sometimes get them confused. On my notes, I wrote The Shining, so who knows what's going on. There's no adults steering the ship. But I liked the new version of Salem's Lot. I thought it was really fun. I thought the gore effects were really good. I thought it moved really well. I thought some of the changes that they made were really good. I love me some Alfre Woodard in anything. I could watch her wash dishes. I love it. So I really thought it was fun. You know, it's one of those things that you either love it or you hate it. And if you really like the original, I think there's things to love in this new one. It is very different and it's styled very differently, but I think that there are definitely things to love in this. You're going to have your favorite one or the other, but I really enjoyed it. If you want to see which version is the favorite of Mama Champagne, check out this video right here. In the number 8 spot, we have Let the Right One In. I've also seen the original, but lately, I've been so distracted and I'm always trying to work on other projects, so things with subtitles are hard for me. I don't have trouble reading subtitles. If I'm in the mood to sit down and watch a movie with subtitles, I don't have any problem. It doesn't annoy me. But lately, I'm always on my phone or I'm doing other things, and so I just need the English language version. Let me live. I'm so sorry. And I also just love Chloe Grace Moretz. So good. That movie, I think it's called Greta. That's another favorite. I absolutely love that one as well, but she is in Let the Right One In, which is the US remake of that. I love it. And what I love about it is that it's an exploration of not just the vampire, but the people who are the caretakers to vampires. Because that's always really important. The people who sort of protect the secret, who do some of the bidding of the vampire. And I think that this one, especially having it set with, there's an older caretaker and then there's this child who sort of becomes the caretaker. That's really interesting to me. And I thought they did it in a very serious way. And it was very compelling. I thought it was really well done. There's one that's a little bit campier that we're going to see down the list. You might be able to guess that. If you can, drop it in the comments below. But I love these stories about the caretakers of vampires. I think they're a lot of fun. So Let the Right One In. And Chloe Grace Moretz is good in anything. I love her. We're going to do a video where we talk about both versions of Carrie. I absolutely loved her in that. I know that that's a divisive film, but absolutely love it. Let the Right One In. In the number 7 spot, Abigail. I thought that was so fun, and I thought it was an interesting, fun interpretation of a child vampire that's very different from Claudia in Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire. I think that it's a different way. It's a much more empowered interesting way of doing a child vampire. I mean, that's such a strange, fraught territory of what that means to take somebody who is a child and turn them into an immortal that's not going to age. I think that Anne Rice explored that in a really interesting way. And I think that it is a very tragic story and a really sometimes kind of suspect, creepy story to have a child vampire. But I thought this one, it was very fun. It was bloody. I thought it was great. I love that she got to be much more empowered. I like that Melissa Barrera, Justice for Melissa. That whole firing from Scream is a mess. I don't know how I feel about Scream 7. We'll probably end up talking about it on this channel. Like we did with Scream 6. Again, did anybody even fucking die in that movie? But I loved it. The cast was great. The Dracula figure who comes in at the end I thought was great. Such a great movie. In the number 6 spot is Tim Burton's Dark Shadows. I love Dark Shadows. We mentioned the TV, but I had to put the movie on here as well. I'm not super in love with Tim Burton and his style. I think it's fine, it's fun, and I love it in certain instances. I loved his Batman movies. I love Dark Shadows. Some of his other stuff I'm not as into, so it's not that I'm like a stan for his style, but you can absolutely tell his signature style in this movie. And I thought it was fun. I can understand how some of the purists who really loved the show and wanted this to be the show, I understand why they were mad. There were certain characters who didn't show up. They kind of played with some of the stuff in terms of who was the werewolf and all that kind of stuff. But we got to see Jonathan Frid and Laura Parker, both may they rest in peace, and David Selby and Catherine Lee Scott all showed up in the movie in cameos. I thought that was great. And I thought, you're taking this daily soap opera that ran for 5 years and condensing it into a 120-minute movie. You have to do something different. It's not going to be the show. And so I can just appreciate it for what it is, and I can still love the show. I don't understand people who act like it's some sort of weird Thunderdome and you can only ever love one version of something. I love the TV show. I love the movie. I'm here for all of it. So I thought it was a lot of fun. It wasn't good enough to crack my top 5, but I do still have a real strong appreciation. I love it. So now we're getting into the top 5, and we have some that are really important for representation in film. And number 5 is Dracula's Daughter. I love this. This is one of the old Universal monsters, and really, if that film hadn't have been so queer and so subversive, I don't understand why Dracula's Daughter is not one of the Universal monsters. And I think that that was kind of their intent. And then instead we got the Bride of Frankenstein, who only appears in one movie and only appears for about 5 minutes in that one movie. And they keep putting them up as like this couple. The Bride of Frankenstein saw that pieced together excuse for a man and immediately was like, no, and was like, I would rather you yeet us out of existence entirely than me have anything to do with that cadaver. No, thank you. No, ma'am. No, sir. Shut it down. Shut it down. We're done here. Shut it down. Call security. Where's my agent? She was done. So I love Dracula's Daughter, and I don't understand why she's not a bigger part of the Universal Monster legacy. It's so queer. It's such a lesbian story. I mean, she kind of flirts with the Doctor a little bit, but she's like finding all these women from the street and like sucking their blood, and it's a good time. It's so interesting. Queer for Fear on Shudder is a fantastic series, and they have a whole episode where they talk about lesbian vampires, and this is absolutely one of them. And so is the next entry on the list. In the number 4 spot, we have The Hunger. This, if you were not lesbian before you watched this, if you watched that and still had any questions, then you're probably not a lesbian, because that movie is the lesbian converter. It is so sexy and sensual. Susan Sarandon is amazing and gorgeous and sensational. And then the other actress, I think it's Catherine Deneuve. She is gorgeous, and that is just so sexy and soft And, oh, it's just yummy. I'm not even a lesbian. Every day I pray, but it never happens. But I'm not a lesbian, but I still love The Hunger. It's so important for queer cinema and that representation of queer vampires. There's so many, going all the way back to Carmilla, that are just lesbian vampire stories, and this one is absolutely the sexiest. So I had to put this at number 4. Despite my best efforts, they're not my people, but I'm here for it, and I love the representation. In the number 3 spot, I put Blackula. Now, I love Blackula, and I think it is a really interesting portrayal of a black vampire. I think they did a really great job. If you've seen the documentary Horror Noir, which I love, that's on Shudder. It's a Shudder exclusive. They talk about that film and how important that was to show a black Dracula. And they talk about other vampire movies. Now, there is a movie that they talk about called Ganja and Hess, which I think is really interesting, but I decided not to make that my entry. I was like, let's do Blackula as the entry, but also kind of call some attention to Ganja and Hess, because that one is a really interesting sort of idea of what a vampire is and how it ties it to blood and how it ties it to the community at large. And I think they did some interesting things. It is sometimes a little bit too cerebral. It's a little bit hard to follow. Now, the problem is, I watched it on Shudder. What I love about Shudder is that a lot of times when they release a new documentary, they will go and find a bunch of the films that the documentary covers and try to add them to their collection, at least for a while. And so for a while you could watch Ganja and Hess on there. But that's one that like never got a full release for a long time. It's been in various different cuts at video stores under different names, like Blood Couple. So I don't know if I even saw the best cut. I don't know if I saw the director's cut. So it could be that it just was cut poorly, but I had a little trouble with it. So it wasn't one that I wanted to put on the list itself. But I was like, you know what? When we talk about Blackula, let's talk about that. Blackula is just good fun. And then the sequel with Pam Grier, oh, it's just so good. So definitely check those out. It's really interesting to see the way that they reimagine, because unfortunately black people in horror get used as monsters a lot, and a lot of it is very negative. So to see this sort of sexy, sensual, intelligent, well-spoken vampire, it really is important, and it really is a fabulous film to like watch and understand how it fits into the history of cinema. So good. In the number 2 spot, I mentioned that I love movies about caretakers, and so I absolutely had to give this to Renfield. If you've seen that, Nicholas Hoult, it is so funny. I love that. So Let the Right One In is if you want to see a movie about a vampire's caretaker that's a little bit more serious, a little bit more thoughtful. Renfield is just bloody and funny and ridiculous and unhinged. I hate Nick Cage. I am sorry if that's controversial to some people. We're being controversial at the gig, whatever. But I don't like Nicolas Cage. I shouldn't say hate. I don't say he hasn't done anything to me personally. But I don't really like Nicolas Cage. I don't enjoy him. But I didn't even mind him in this movie. I sort of enjoyed him in this movie. His like weird, quirky way of being fits so much better in this movie, so I love it. Renfield, if you haven't seen it, it is so funny, and it is, again, considering that Renfield character, the caretaker, the person who has to keep the vampires secret and help them survive and take care of them in the daylight, all of that, so good. I loved it. And in the number 1 spot...
What's your damage?
I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Now, I love the TV series of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I easily could have put that at the beginning, but I knew we were going to talk about the movie, and so I was like, you know what? I love the TV series more because there's just so much. There's 7 seasons. They can develop the characters and the themes and the story, but for a single-use product, the movie is fantastic. It's sort of like... if you're a D&D nerd like me, it's the difference between a campaign and a one-shot. What they did with Buffy the TV series is perfect for a campaign where you can build it out. Buffy the Vampire Slayer with Kristy Swanson is the one-shot. It's got Luke Perry. Oh, it's so good. Paul Rubens, his death scene that goes on and on and on and on and on. Kiefer Sutherland is great. It's so funny. The fashion is so ridiculous. And I know that Joss Whedon is kind of a problematic figure right now. I know that people feel all kinds of ways, and I'm not saying to do anything that's going to give him money, but I already own it on DVD. I've owned it for many, many years. I've owned the series on DVD for many, many years, so I'm not doing any paid streaming or anything. I just love it. I just think it's so funny. I think it's so clever. And just so of its time. It catches the like extremes of the slang and the fashion and everything. Absolutely love it. The TV series, if you haven't seen it, one of my favorite episodes of TV ever, The Body. If you know, you know. You absolutely have to watch the series. It's so good. But don't slag off the movie. It's a different tone. It's a different way of presenting it. But again, campaign versus one shot. For just its own product, not comparing it to anything else. I think it's so good. It's so fun. It's vampires done to campy perfection. All right, that is the video. Thank you so much for watching. I am so excited. I love vampires. Vampires aren't my favorite, so it's one of those things where it's like, this was fun to make. And I know that there aren't any real like deep cut horror films because I'm not a vampire aficionado. It would be a similar thing. You can let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a video about my top zombie movies, but zombies aren't my favorite, so you're gonna get more kind of like larger releases, mainstream stuff, or stuff I've seen in documentaries and checked out. Let me know if you'd be interested in that. But again, vampires, it's not my favorite, but I like it. I like it when it's either campy or sexy. I love sexy vampires. While you're down there leaving me those comments, don't forget to give me that thumbs up to tell me that you liked it. Or if you are a vampire stan and I left all of your favorites off because I don't watch hardly anything vampire, then go ahead and give me that thumbs down. It is all engagement. The algorithm isn't a picky bitch, and neither am I. And while you're down there, don't forget to hit that bell icon to be notified of all future uploads. I try really hard to upload at least one video a week, and I try to cycle through glam, geek, and gore as much as possible, so there's a little of everything for everyone. And sometimes, if you're lucky, if the stars align, you may even get a bonus video. Ooh, Renfield-erific! If you'd like to chat, banter, or commiserate in between uploads, all of my social media will be linked down in the description box below, including a link to my website, The World of Champagne at JanessaJ.com. Thank you so much for watching. I love and appreciate all of you. I hope you saw Nosferatu. If you did, let me know down below what you thought of it. And Renfield, which I really loved, and Nosferatu both have Nicholas Hoult. Beautiful eye candy. Definitely check it out and let me know your thoughts on Nosferatu down in the comments below, as well as any of these other films. And until I see you again, bye. I know what you are. Say it. Vampire.
Interesting that you're like super like bubbly pinkish looking.
Yeah, talking about vampires. Oh, I wrote down The Shining and I meant to say Salem's Lot. I was like, The Shining's not vampires.
Do you know who the Vivian is?
Yep.
She died.
What?
Yeah. James Lee Williams, professionally known as the Vivian, has tragically died aged 32.
Oh my gosh. We'll revisit that at dinner.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, that's
I
all
was
right.
just like, I don't know who this is, but it was posted 2 hours ago, so...
Interesting. And number one... Oh, what's the... Especially... Oh. And what... Oh. If you'd like to chant, banter... I keep saying chant when I do that.
You can chant,
To
too.
chant,